Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. We are continuing our coverage of this year's Academy Awards, and today we welcome the Oscar-nominated sound team behind One Battle After Another, Paul Thomas Anderson's incredible film, which is up for a whopping 13 awards, including Best Picture. Joining us today to talk about their nomination in the Best Sound category, we welcome three-time Academy Award nominee, production sound mixer, Jose Antonio Garcia, sound designer, supervising sound editor, and re-recording mixer, Chris Garbosio, who is celebrating his fourth Oscar nomination, and first-time nominee, re-recording mixer, Tony Villaflor. I've honestly been so excited to have these guys on, not just because I've known Chris for over 25 years, but because I've been dying to talk about the sound in this movie. I've seen it 3 times, and I'm still blown away by it. But let's start at the beginning, because if you've seen the movie, then you know it starts off with a bang. I'm talking about the French 75 raid on the Immigration Detention Center, which starts simply enough before hitting us with Johnny Greenwood's incredible score, and then, well, all hell breaks loose, sonically at least. So that's where I wanted to start our conversation, with how they approached that sequence, not just from a technical perspective, but what they needed to convey to set this story up properly from the very first minutes of the film. Here's Chris Garbosio.
It truly is that. I mean, we're setting the stage. I mean, watching that sequence for the first time, I was kind of blown away. Whoa. I mean, Paul is just going for it here. This is not like anything else he's done. And everything is like, from our standpoint, and I think everybody works on these movies, everything is a stylistic choice, right? And, you know, what the energy that brings to the start of the movie really want to set the tone for what's coming. After this kind of really intense opening, things kind of settle in a little bit, and then we start learning more, and then the movie just unfolds, and there's so much tension and release in this movie that it starts with this kind of insane energy. We really just wanted to make a huge impact straight away. And like even starting, like when I first started working on that, so that was the first section that we worked on. I asked Paul how big he wanted to go. I think we should go big with this. I think we should go Atmos. And I said, let me do the first 15 minutes how I think we should do it. And then see how you react, because, you know, like sometimes he can kind of be a little standoffish on that kind of a thing. But I got the sense that he kind of wanted to go for it. So, you know, from the first piano notes, I took everything away. Just let's focus on this piano. Let's stylize this first couple seconds, and then boom, you're just hit with this giant music cue, which is phenomenal. Big semis coming past you, immigration, the wall. I mean, and then the people are descending upon the camp, and they're taking over this camp, and it's just a wild ride. So we just want to set the tone and make that stylistic choice that this thing's gonna bring a lot at you. And I do think, I'm glad you've seen it 3 times, because I think it gets better each time you see it. I mean, I watched this time, working on the movie. I've seen this film so many times, and I never got tired of watching it, which is very unusual.
Chris, you talked about that, you know, in exploring that first 15 minutes or so, you know, you wanted to do it in Atmos, and Paul's never worked in Atmos before. So tell me a little bit about that decision. Why did you think, like, why was this particular movie, you know, right? Why was that the right tool for this movie?
Once I kind of got the sense of the scope of the film and how cinematic it is, and knowing that he shot it in VistaVision, and that it just seemed like if you were ever going to do this, which you might not ever do this, but if you were ever going to do this, now is the time, because, you know, let's make the screen as big as possible. Let's make it as immersive as possible. And he was open to it. And we got into it, and I think we utilized it. And, you know, working with Paul's a very intentional person. It's like, he's not going to let us kind of just goof off and do things that are just, because we can. It has to be for a reason. And I think this film has a multitude of reasons of why it was the right time to use Atmos.
That sequence specifically, like we really like got into it, during the final mix. Like I think, I was not like trying to be necessarily like timid about things, but just knowing like his style, like I didn't want to go too far and take him out of it. But that first 15 minutes is a sequence that he was specifically like really intentional about calling out, like, let's use the format. Like if we're going to do it, like, let's go all the way with it. So like the semis, once they kind of start sneaking in, like they go into the surrounds and into the overheads. And once you get the flares, they're all objects and they're all kind of panning over your head. And yeah, it seemed like the perfect time and the perfect sequence to kind of see, take it as far as you can. And yeah, he kind of jumped in there and he was really into it.
And it works. It's a great sequence. It's a kind of a perfect way to open the film. Jose, I want to bring you into the conversation because Chris mentioned shooting the film in VistaVision, and I know that must have complicated your life quite a bit. We had a Johnny Byrne on the podcast a few months ago to talk about Begonia, and he gave us quite an earful about the noise that the VistaVision cameras make. I know that's it looks fantastic, but it complicates your life quite a bit. Tell us about how you worked around the VistaVision. Because the other thing I noticed, I made a note of this. I heard that there's no ADR in this film, which I have a hard time believing. But tell us how you were able to pull that off.
Well, that's what I've been told, but I wasn't there through the process. But mostly it was thinking mostly in terms of masking. I tried to capture, because Paul is a type of guy that doesn't mind getting gritty, and therefore the sound wasn't on the purist style that generally we do. We try to minimize everything. So in this case, it was trying to figure out what, sounds could compensate a little bit the VistaVision sound, because it's quite loud. It's moving a lot of material, and it was basically also, wiring everybody. Again, it comes to masking, because if the voice is strong enough, you can clip around it. The other thing we did was sometimes we got to do the scene just for sound. Although I don't know, we didn't do too many of those, but I don't know if they were able to stuff that performance into their mouths of the cut they chose. But, basically it was defend yourself however you can and think about how you can, feel or try to mask out the VistaVision, which is a big challenge, because they're pretty loud. I mean, they're not as loud as the IMAX, but they're extremely noisy.
I appreciate you talking about Paul and his willingness to kind of go with the gritty aesthetic. It reminds me, Chris, you've been working with Paul since Punch Drunk Love was the first time, right?
Yes.
And I remember very well that experience because I was at Skywalker at the time. And one of my favorite kind of mixed stories came out of that Punch Drunk experience, which was there was a sequence with Barry, who is Adam Sandler's character, where he has the meltdown in the bathroom at the restaurant, and he kind of destroys the bathroom at the restaurant. And I remember you guys, Foley had just worked so hard to replicate, all this destruction sound, and sound effects editors had gone in and made it all pristine, and you guys played it back for Paul. And Chris, you were probably on stage. What happened? You remember what happened after that point?
He said, "What's this? What's this?" We had, it was perfect. With the distorted microphone, it's completely distorted. He's like, "Yeah, it's perfect. What are you talking about? Like, what are you guys doing? Like, that's what we want it to sound like that." And they had just thrown like a Radio Shack mic on the floor, and it's completely overmodulated. And that's what we went with. And it's awesome. It works perfect. And that is the beauty of collaborating with somebody like that. Is there's times where they know better. There's times when you know better, and it's all about kind of figuring out together. And that was definitely one of those moments. Like, okay, he's got a different way of doing things. And then you kind of realize that. One of the things I realized over time was it's like, okay, maybe start by doing the absolute thing you wouldn't do first. And then, because we talked about like, okay, let's break it. And then we'll know if once we've broken it, then we can just come back a little bit and fix it to that level right before broken. So, he loves that kind of stuff. So, again, the stylistic choices, there's always, we're always thinking about, I know I'm always thinking about how any director might want it to play. And, we have a lot of conversations and sometimes they kind of, you just kind of go for it. Like that opening sequence I was kind of left to my own devices, and I didn't go so far out of the, like out of left field, but it was definitely like, okay, let's see let me just go for it and see how he responds. And he was like, this is freaking great. I can actually hear the words and the energy is great.
But I feel like that speaks a lot to you knowing his aesthetic, right? Like you can go big with it, but like, that he's going to want it gritty, he's going to want it like kind of in camera production-y. So you can like do your Hollywood kind of cinematic thing to it, but stay in the style and in the palette of Paul Thomas Anderson. So you kind of know, what he's going to like.
Get out of here with your Hollywood sound design.
Yeah, 100%. I've been down that road. There's no need to go down that road. But we had some chances in this one, and I think there's a great balance, I think, in this mix, which makes it interesting because there is that gritty realism to the whole thing. And one of the things, like over time, that when I think about working with Paul, I think about how can I make it sound like it's the best production sound ever? If everything was perfectly recorded, on set, so where it sounds like production sound, but it's just like amazing. That's kind of the way I'm always thinking for working with Paul. And this movie has definitely wanted that for sure.
I do want to just follow up on that, the whole thing about no ADR. So talk to us, Chris, a little bit about like, the dialogue editing and the pre-mixing and the work that you guys had to do to bring that track up.
We got to start a little early, which worked out. And Rich Quinn, who was the dialogue supervisor, and he's worked on a bunch of Paul movies as well. So they know Rich, and they're like, okay, let's get started on a couple scenes here that we're having some issues with intelligibility and see where we get. And so Rich, dug into the tracks. He, immediately got rid of stuff that wasn't bringing anything, maybe just bringing noise, camera noise, whatever. We're always very protective of the dialogue and making sure that we don't, go too far with cleaning it up. It's still, it's like, let's make the cursory passive cleaning up, because then, then it comes to me, and then I if I really want to kind of dig in, and I have all the elements, Rich is working with the dialogue only mostly. But when I get it, I'm kind of like putting it up against other things, and there's always masking. So there's times where you kind of really have to dig into the noise reduction, and times you don't. Now, I was reminded that Lockjaw does have a couple lines, but they're only because they wanted to change the words, not because it wasn't because of intelligibility. So yeah, because Erica Fromm in the post super, she was like, "There's those lines when Lockjaw's in there with Perfidia." I'm like, but they changed the line.
I understand that there was some, for the first time in a long time, that Paul did some test screenings, audience test screenings, to kind of, just make sure that the tone of the film was playing. So what was the temp process like? And you don't normally do a lot of temps on Paul's movies, do you?
And we didn't do any temps on this. One of the way we were working was, I'd say, okay, what are the scenes that you're having issues with? And then I'd get a list, and then we'd work on those sections, get the team focused on that. I'd make a pass, send it down, and if there's any notes, kind of update it. and then just send them that stuff. So we were sending them stuff throughout the whole process. So we were doing it in 5.1. So they were monitoring them for 5.1, and they had those stems, and that's basically when they needed to make a DCP for a test audience. They either, they took what we had, or, they would say, okay, we're doing the screening in 2 weeks. We want this and this also put in there. There's a new cue from Johnny, whatever. And then I'd send them that, and then they would just take it from there.
Tell me about working with Johnny Greenwood's score. I mean, we can't talk about the track on this movie without discussing the musical score, because it's really extraordinary what Johnny accomplished with this movie.
The whole score is phenomenal. The one that always sticks out in my mind is the 23-minute cue that happens like around the middle of the movie that takes us into the riot. I mean, that is just such a wild cue. And that was the one I think I had the most fun with mixing, because, I had good stems on that. We made a couple passes, and always listening as you're playing back for the director, like, what else can I bring to this? And after one of the passes, I was like, what if I have this stuff kind of going they're not full overheads, but they're up. And it's so chaotic. And I'm like, well, what if I start moving that stuff around in kind of the sides and the overheads, and kind of spinning stuff around? Not all the time, but like at key chaotic moments, and where these flourishes that are in the music kind of want to kind of elevate it all. So that was definitely one of those cues that I was able to have a lot of fun with, like drum there, because we had drum fills and stuff. And Paul had talked about like Space Jam, or not the movie Space Jam, but like the cosmic 70s music, where stuff's panning around, where there's like flangers on drums and that kind of stuff. We didn't go that far, but I kind of got the vibe, but with what he was kind of thinking for that. And that went well. And then there's the cue that we start with. It comes back 3 times in the film, and we were referring to it as Susty. I think suspended decoy. I don't know if that was the name of the cue, but we always Susty. Here comes Susty. But that's a big, beautiful, bold cue. It was great orchestration. We had 2 sets of strings. We had the Abbey Road strings. We had the air strings. One was a little more close up. One was bigger. Sometimes we used one over the other. Sometimes we just used them all. Really spread that out. And his music is so creative, so non-traditional, sometimes traditional. I think he's just like a brilliant mind, that he just looks at like making music as it's almost like a kid's game in a way. Like when you're a child, like finding something out for the first time, just have the curiosity of like, well, what if I tried this? What if I tried that? He's just amazing.
Let's fight fire with fire. Roger that. Net call. Send in Eddie Van Halen.
I love the way you talk about being able to move that around in Atmos and kind of play with it, and also just use that to contribute to this sense of chaos and unease. One of the things I love about having these conversations at this point in the process is that you guys have been through the bake-off. You made the short list. You were invited to put together the 10-minute reel to show at the Academy for the bake-off. So I always love to kind of talk through the decisions that you made about what sequences you wanted to put in the 10-minute showcase reel that the sound branch got to hear when you were shortlisted. And so, I know that the reel that you guys put together included that car chase from the opening of the film, closer to the opening of the film after the bank heist that goes right. I'm always kind of curious, like, what was the decision? Like, why the three sequences that you guys put in the reel were that and the riot and then the River of Hills, and why those three sequences, and tell us a little bit about that car chase sequence.
I was pretty stoked to put in that first post heist gone wrong, car chase getaway sequence, just because there's no music during that sequence, so like it's all sound effects, and I think it's a really good like indicator and is really descriptive of Paul's style and kind of what he's looking for in a sequence like that. Like that sequence, like it's not pretty, it's not like Hollywood sleek sexy, it's like nasty and it's junky, and it's so and because of the sound design of all of that, like it's really kind of scary and terrifying. You really feel like they've lost control and it's over for them, and danger, it's just, they're done. So yeah, I think it was a really good choice just to show off like the sound design, but also like how even though the sound design and the editing is in Paul's style and it's junky and it's nasty, you can use whatever, adjective you'd like to use there. It's kind of 70s or it's kind of production-y. I think the presentation and the mix of it is still big and bold and cinematic and kind of Hollywood, for a lack of a better term. Like, even though you kind of have those more production-y style sound effects, like we're not trying to present them in like that junky, nasty way. We're trying to present them in the biggest, boldest, most impactful way that we can. So like that's why I was excited to show that one in the Bake Off.
I have that image and the sound in my head of, that Taurus that's kind of like just going in between the lanes and pushing cars out of the way. Like, that's such a crazy chase sequence, but that's amazing. Jose, that must have been some fun for you on set for production capture as well.
We try to capture as much as, the actors, the effects of the crashes and stuff like that. So it did imply, hiding some mics where the crashes would allegedly happen. Sometimes we missed. But, I think we got to capture a couple of very, very good crashes. The final one is very good. But it was really intense because, it was dangerous as well. So I had to make sure the bag was properly restrained, shall we say, because, they were driving actually pretty fast.
Tell me about the riot scene, which is sort of towards the middle of the film, and why you guys put that in the Bake Off reel.
Well, that to me is like a great representation of kind of all of everybody's here's work. Jose was able to capture the crowds. We had great coverage on the crowds, which then Rich Quinn went in and synchronized all these different tracks and then made it into a nice rhythmic chant. So we had, that was great to have that. And that was, like, I think might be one of the more surrounding moments in the film, which, and it was that there was one time early on that Paul was like, it's too much in the surrounds. I'm like, no, but we're gonna flip. So we're in this perspective, and then we're gonna go to the opposite. It's just a little bit back. I'm like, all right, a little bit back. But like it's that intensity of. There's a lot of perspectives in that one, and I love that Lockjaw comes in. He's like, whatever, these clowns, like, they're okay. They're protesting against us. We got our own set of agenda. We're going to take care of the situation. But you're outside. You feel like a lot of people, and then you go inside, and now we're close up with people. And Eddie Van Halen and the torch comes in, and you got the military guys, and you have the line of the police that are there with all their shields, and we kind of really leaned into all the Foley, and there's some great production stuff there, just really gritty, like you really feel like all their gear and steps and the big plastic shields, and then next thing you know, you're with Sensei and the skateboarders, and there's that whole moment, which is amazing. And then they're up on the rooftops, and so for me, that was a great moment where we have Johnny's score, like the part of the score that I really love the chaos of. You have great production sound, and then we brought Justin Doyle cut the crap out of that scene, and he just great energy with sound effects, and I think it really just feels like you're in that moment, and it's just a great representation of everybody's work from all the departments: music, production, sound effects, Foley, dialogue, all of it. So that was kind of one of the reasons I wanted to showcase that.
The bake-off reel, which is so important because that's what the Academy sees, and that's the piece that gets you the votes to go from the short list to actually getting nominated for the Academy Award. You chose to end the bake-off reel with the River of Hills sequence, which is just, I think it's going to be one of those iconic moments in film storytelling. So, Chris, I know that you've worked with Paul for a long time. You read the scripts before he goes out and shoots. Like, how did that sequence even read on the page? It's like, it's just three people in three different cars kind of, running around after each other for 5 minutes. What was your reaction to reading that on the page?
Well, my reaction was, we need to make sure we get some coverage on these cars. Because, knowing Paul and knowing any director, if something happens on set that was kind of magical sound wise in production, and you don't even have a reference for it, then it could potentially be a problem. So reading it was like, oh damn, there's some cars, and I'm it's one of the things I'm always fighting for. It's like, well, you have the cars, the actual cars, you have the drivers, you have the road, you have the permit to do that. Can we just spend a little time and try and get some good recordings of these vehicles, because they're going to be really useful, hopefully.
Yeah.
And in this case, I mean, Bob's car is everything that Jose recorded. We did not. That is what came from Jose. That was all wild track stuff.
You're talking about that janky Nissan that he hot wires.
Yes,
It sounds like a souped up lawnmower to me. I don't what that car. There's so much character in the sound of that car.
It's fantastic. Like that is one of the. I'm sure we would have come up with something great, but with it, I'm pretty sure we could not have replicated that thing. And it's just getting maxed out. That thing is just like full bore, and so it just has that hilarious sound, which is so representative of Bob's character, which is, the other part of it is like, you couldn't have picked a better sound for that character, his car. If he was in like the Mustang or the Charger, you'd have been like, all right, well, okay. But like that car and that sound is so perfect. So again, it's having everybody's work kind of showcased and just how valuable it can be to have good production sound, because you just never know what you're going to get. Even when, we go out with all our gear, best, Jose's got a great setup. You go out and you're like, okay, you set things up for a month in advance, you get there, and then like maybe it's kind of a dud. You didn't get anything. You thought it was going to be great, and it was like, it's okay. So you just never know. Like, and you might just have your iPhone, and then you put it out, you just capture one little sound that like is really interesting. And so it's kind of like, even in like recording studios, it's like always be recording, you get the magic take, when they didn't think they were playing or whatever. So, yeah, having that, and then, it's such an iconic sequence that, and it just kept coming up. People were like, "Oh man, that chase at the end of the movie is amazing on River Hills." It's like, and we worked and worked and worked and worked and worked on that sequence, trying to find what that was supposed to be.
We mixed the shit out of that sequence. We just took a lot of like thought and like racking our brains as to like how to make it what it wanted to be. It's such a different sequence, like you're saying. It's shot differently. It's cut together differently. Like the image that we have to work with is different than your typical like chase scene. It's you're not like guided by the picture of exactly what to do, where there's like, there are these buys and there are these crashes. It's very like non-traditional.
It's not fast cuts. And really, when you think about that scene, there's so few elements that you have to work with from a sound perspective. Is like, you got 3 engines, you got some wind, you got tires on pavement, and Willa breathing a little bit, and music. But that's all you have to work with. And this thing is like 5.5 minutes.
You got it, dude. You nailed it. I mean, that is the challenge of that scene. And I think it took a while to just like remember like what the story is, right? Like we're never there as like the sound team to be like putting in cool sounds because it's cool, right? Like we're trying to find like what the story is. And like, I think that's ultimately like how we got to where it was. Like, what is the story in these shots, and finding the anxiety, finding the tension, throughout the whole sequence. And it is those like small details. It's the seatbelt ding, which was an Andy Jurgensen thing. He's the editor. But just like having a seatbelt ding going off the whole time is like, it makes you feel away. And then all these very specific rattles, and Chris did some awesome stuff with the sound design for the road to really like bring that into play in the chase there. And yeah, like it was just, it's a tricky sequence because what you're looking at is just like very different from the traditional chase scene, kind of thing. But that's what makes that scene, different and effective.
You guys took some opportunities to have a little bit of fun with it as well. Like there's some sound moments in there that logically don't make any sense whatsoever. Like I've been thinking about that. It's a long shot with the cars chasing each other, and then kind of, Bob's car comes in. It's the first time we see him way off in the distance. Yeah. And you just hear a little bit of like, which you would never hear from that. But like, it was
you
just,
need to know that Bob has entered the race, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
You need to be like narrating as much as you can for the audience and be doing as much storytelling,
There's a great moment that's so satisfying. Like, when Willa's car like comes across one of the rises and then drops out of frame for a little bit and then comes back up. It was like, there's no reason for you to take out the sound of her car completely when the car goes out of frame but it's so satisfying when it comes back in. So like, I love those moments where you guys cheat reality a little bit.
I thought moments like that, like also helped with the storytelling and with the anxiety, like not knowing what's on the other side of these hills. Like it just like adds to the tension of the scene.
In film school, they should be teaching that class as like just a master class on how to build tension.
For sure. And then it ends. I love that car crash at the end. That's my favorite car crash in the movie. and then you get to like the the emotional release that you've been waiting for 2.5 hours when Bob and Willa are finally reunited. And then you kind of, after the big crash, we get to shift gears and we can focus on the acting and the performances, and we can help, heighten those things. Like there are all these like wins that are going on after, Willa shoots Tim. And like, I feel like Chris and I could have like kept going at those wins forever just to like flesh out more and more detail. But like, yeah, just trying to enhance the storytelling there and the emotion of the scene, and trying to shift gears, from that big sequence to this like really emotional, exclamation point at the end of the movie.
One of the sounds that happened at the end of that sequence are the scanner sounds, which are very unscanner-like. And that was something that Paul worked with Johnny Greenwood for a long time to kind of get that right. And I was always kind of like, well, it's not a practical sound effect, which I'm fine with. And I love that it's kind of whimsical, and we hear it a couple times in the movie, and it's not an obvious thing, but when I watched it for the first time with an audience, and I heard that the scanner sound, there was something so emotionally gratifying in that moment, because Willa's ready to shoot Bob. She's like, I don't know who you are. I don't know who any of these people are. I'm done with it. And there's something kind of like almost like a mantra to it a little bit. And it's just a very cool little detail that Paul was committed to it, and I loved it. I love that he was like, this is the thing. And it really like was one of those moments where like seeing it like through a bigger vision of kind of, part of this collaboration. I was like, oh man, that is really powerful, because that moment when they are able to hug and get in the car and get the hell out of there, it's just super powerful, super emotional. And, it just speaks to this whole, like, what an amazing filmmaker that Paul really is, and all the people it brings into the fold.
He's thinking about it like, is this emotional? Like, is it working? He doesn't care if it's like a cool sound that like we made, right? Like the question is like, is it powerful? Does it work? You know what I mean? And like you're saying, it's maybe not what you would normally want to do, but like it works on an emotional level.
And that's just his style of shooting too. I mean, that's how he operates every day. Always like searching and not being afraid of, being wrong or, nailing it. It's just, he's not afraid of risks.
He's certainly not. Yeah. We don't really talk in this way very often, because I think you don't get a chance to work on movies like this very often. But have you guys processed this experience? Like, what is it like? How does it feel to work on a movie that you're pretty sure people are still going to be looking at in 50 years, 75 years? That's going to be such a classic.
I mean, that is what you dream about working on. That's, the artistry of this film. It's what you want every time you start a film, is to watch it and go like, okay, this is a film, and you never know how it's going to be received, but it's like, there's something here, and you just want to do your best work and elevate it as much as you can. And it's amazing. I mean, it's truly incredible. And especially, we've all worked with Paul for different amounts of times. For me, it's just really gratifying to have this experience, over 20 years, that, each film has its own kind of, it's bringing its own thing. They're all amazing. And, this one obviously is getting a lot of accolades, and you just think, yeah, people are going to be watching this thing, 40, 50, 60 years down the road. And I mean, that's incredible. It's an incredible feeling.
I think we all knew it the first time we saw it. When I first saw it, I watched it, we do everything still in reels. So about 20-minute chunks. And I was watching it in a room next to Chris's sound design room. And at the end of every reel, I just like would burst into Chris's room. I was like, are you kidding me, dude? And I would like quote it to him immediately. And like, Yeah, just like at the end of every reel, I would bust down his door and I would be like, dude, you got to be kidding me. This is insane. So like, ultimately the answer to your question, we'll see in 10 years or 20 years what it's like to have worked on a movie like this. But I think we all just knew it was something incredibly special from the first time we saw it.
And since the script as well, because, the script is also brilliant. When I wasn't able to tell people what you sign your NDA, I would say, it's one of the most beautiful attempts of distilling our human nature, which I think he accomplishes very, very beautifully.
Very, very well said, Jose. Well, I think, you guys, I think about, Paul's movie and there's, so many just iconic, classic sound moments in these movies. Chris, I'm thinking back to like that first 10, 15 minutes of There Will Be Blood, which we had on the Skywalker sound demo reel for several years because it's just from a sound standpoint, it's just such great sonic storytelling. And even, from the Phantom Thread, that breakfast sequence, that's a great use of sound design to tell you something about the character and the story in a film. So I feel like, Paul just serves up all these great opportunities to you guys for sound design and mix. And it's just, I think this movie also has a bunch that are going to go into the lexicon. Guys, thank you so much for coming on the Dolby podcast today to talk to us about the movie. It's been a great pleasure.
Thanks, you,
Glenn.
Glenn.
For having us, Glenn.
Many thanks to Tony, Chris, and Jose for joining us on the show today. And an extra special thanks to our friends at Warner Brothers for helping us put this conversation together. You can watch one battle after another right now on HBO Max in Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. We'll have links, as always, in our show notes. And as I mentioned up top, this episode is part of our ongoing coverage of the 98th Academy Awards, coming to you live on Sunday, March 15th from the Dolby Theater here in Hollywood. As we do every year, we've been hosting many conversations with the nominees in sound, cinematography, and original score categories. So be sure you're subscribed to us here at Dolby Creator Talks. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of the show, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Kahn. Thanks for joining us.